Hello and welcome to the Turn 4 podcast. I am your host, Dan Maldonado. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. This podcast comes from two lifelong fans of IndyCar and other forms of motorsport. I can't, of course, do this on my own. Never going to do this on my own. I've only done it on my own one time. It was our worst rated show. So let me introduce you to our co-host, Tim Reiner. Hey, Timmy.
Hey, Dan, what's going on? I don't think
you?
I'm bringing any of the guests. I think you're attracting all the guests. I'm just here to do my thing. I should say listeners, but whatever.
Beg to differ.
Well,
I did the one show on my own that one time, the Gateway
hotel
show.
Room.
No, I did the Gateway show here by myself.
But weren't you in a hotel room?
Nope, I was right here.
No, you were right there.
Yep.
Just talking away.
How are you?
Well, Gateway's coming up, so maybe...
Got your glass of water. Don't spill it on anything. That's happened before during the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
We always have our drinks. We have different drinks, though, right? I have coffee.
You're always coffee, not tea,
brew.
as we were talking about before the show.
It's
always coffee. I don't know what PJ's is, but...
PJ's is a coffee house out of New Orleans. Oh. Wonderful little coffee house, about 180 units out of the New Orleans market. They have cool mugs. That's the reason why I have one. So,
nice.
Yeah. Thanks to Chef Matty B, I have a cool PJ's mug. So
awesome.
Appreciate all that.
I drink coffee too, but not at not in the evening, not 8 o'clock.
You want to talk about how you drink coffee, or we don't want to bring that up to the show?
Well, we don't have to talk about it. I drink it like anybody else does, out of a mug.
You do?
And that's it. I just might drink some old coffee some days.
Yeah, there it is.
That's all, right? Some days brew a pot, drink half one day and the other half the next day.
There you go.
Today was
the Turn 4 podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Today was the second half of the pot, so I was heating it up. If
you want to help Tim become a Patreon sponsor and choose the $10 a month sponsorship on our Patreon page, so we can help get Tim a Keurig so he can just brew a single serve.
I think I can get one at a wholesale rate. I think I've got connections.
I think you probably could. Yeah, I think you probably could. So.
But then I got to buy the little cups, right? And those
God forbid. So, forbid. Boy.
But I don't drink coffee this late, so I'm on coffee break. I've done it once or twice, and I think I stayed up for most of the night looking at the ceiling.
Well, as I've gotten older, we've transitioned into a half calf.
Oh. Half decaf, huh? So one cup is like a half cup, 2 cups is a cup. Nice.
Maybe I drink.
Never heard of it. Is that Keurig?
No, it's a Maxwell House, and I think Meyer has one too.
Oh, nice.
Even though I'm wearing the Hy-Vee shirt, we don't have a Hy-Vee in Southeast Michigan where I live. Yeah. But if they did,
you'd go to Hy-Vee?
I would. I go to Hy-Vee when I travel.
Yeah, I've been in there
because as part of my everyday responsibilities, the markets in which I visit, there are Hy-Vees.
Yeah, I was in Omaha, and I had to cross the border to go to the Hy-Vee. I was like, I'm going.
There you go.
I'm going to check it out. So I did that.
I went to the
last year about this time, I think.
I was in Des Moines maybe about 6 weeks ago. If we have any listeners now, I'm sure this is riveting. But I was in Des Moines about 6 weeks ago and popped into a Hy-Vee there. Got gas at the Hy-Vee for the rental car before I returned it to the national counter that I had to go to turn the car or pick up the car and turn the car back. So
I love that I love that you're always team sponsored for the show. Like you have so many sponsors over there, and I just wear a green shirt or a pink shirt, and that's what I do.
The pink shirt was the first time in 76 episodes that you've ever worn.
Oh.
And the green shirt's probably a little more common, the color at least.
Yeah, but it's kind of different with your red. Almost a Christmas.
But I have I've worn this before. I
know you have.
I was thrilled.
How's the neck?
It's tight. It's making my head look bigger than it already is. So, yeah, if you want to see all this riveting action, tune into our YouTube channel.
Yeah, you can watch this go down.
This is the number 45 Jack Harvey Hy-Vee shirt. So,
the guy that won't be on the team next year, is that what I hear?
Yeah, stop being a hater. When I wore this to Indy in 2022, remember a Hy-Vee employee asked me if I was a Hy-Vee employee. And I was like, no, dude, I bought this on the website. Come on now.
Because you're the only guy that had a Hy-Vee shirt on.
I was literally the only guy wearing a Hy-Vee shirt.
Oh, man.
So I also have the
Still might be.
Jack shirt. Probably. Oh well. Hey, dude, they're on the rebound.
That's okay though,
they're
man.
On the
they're
rebound.
on the up and up, man.
They
Everything's
are,
going
which
well
is
over there.
a wonderful transition into our first part of this story is qualifying. Rahal Letterman Lanigan, RLL. Wow. WTF, Tim? Anybody expect that?
I was in shock.
Pole for Graham and second place for Lundgaard. Front row shutout by RLL.
I know. I was in shock. I think our Twitter handle said something about it, but
I saw it. I thought it was pretty clever. The Earth shook from its axis or something. Right?
Something happened. Something miraculously happened on Friday. Maybe they just need Friday qualifying and skip the Saturday stuff. I have no idea, but
he was good in warm up. I don't, or not in warm up, in practice one. I don't put any stock in any of those, as you know, but maybe the compressed schedule helped, right? They just had it. They were ready. They were good off the truck, which for this team, let's face it, small miracles, right? I mean, never cease. But
I guess you got to look back at the May race though, right? Lundgaard was on pole, so they had the setup.
Lundgaard was good there. They didn't have a good race setup, which, we're going to talk about here, but Lundgaard was on pole there. Couldn't really do anything to Pelot, who finished 15 or 17 seconds up the road.
Yeah.
We could have, I suppose, believed that Rahal was going to be this good. I don't know. I would have believed that Rahal as a team would have been this good. I mean, Graham first, Lundgaard second, Jack Harvey eighth, which got pushed to 14th because of an engine change. This was Graham's first pole since 2017 in Detroit. And if you remember that weekend, that was the weekend he swept the doubleheader in Detroit.
Yeah.
That was the Aero package cars, right?
So a long time ago.
So good for them, right? I mean, good for them. Hopefully this stays in a positive trajectory. But, hopefully, I mean, good things to come. We'll see what they're like on the oval. I think, that's still a work in progress for them. But I think I would say outside of Gateway coming up here in a couple of weeks that they should show well, at Portland and at Laguna Seca.
I would think so. You got two road courses, right? And if you got a road course setup, I think it would transfer to those events. Maybe not completely, but I would think of some sort of, you use the same dampers, you use the same settings. At least that's where you go there with, right? That's what you start off with and see where it kind of puts you. But I would suspect they're going to do well. I'm not anticipating a whole lot coming out of them here at Gateway, but I guess we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks. But super impressed, kind of shocking for me. I don't know. Were you rooting for Graham to pull this off and do his thing, or were you kind of like?
I was.
You were.
I was, because I think, like, if you're Graham, even though it's not the same, you're rolling into that place thinking, this place sent me home in May, right before Brian Reinbold and the unfortunate wreck for Stefan Wilson, before Brian Reinbold threw him a lifeline to keep him in the show. But I mean, that place sent him home in May.
And he had a terrible 500 anyways. It didn't even matter that he was in it, honestly.
The whole team did.
But he did terrible in that car too. It was like, it just wasn't there.
Right.
So to see him come back, I was excited for him and the family, of course, but I was kind of in shock. I was like, there's no way he's going to pull this off. And then mid-race, I'm like, maybe he's got this. He's got great pace. He got great pace on the hard tires, right? So he's on the hard compound, and I know we'll get into that a little bit, but over the stint, they didn't fall off like they did, in my opinion, in May. Like they were falling off, and particularly Lundgaard fell off on that one. But it was quite the event, and quite. You had mentioned you had congratulated some of the teammates on the victory last time, and maybe they would have been more prone for your kind words this time.
Maybe
to liking them. So
to my surprise, but in a different way, Joseph Newgarden and Will Power, both pretty aggravated with their qualifying efforts this past weekend. Power did, however, stop and Did you see this? They came off, they're eliminated, right? And they were both
Mm-hmm.
red-faced and aggravated. Of course, Wright Newgarden was pounding on the pit stand, and he was pretty aggravated, which I understand. But and Will Power was too. And you don't normally see Will that mad or really that sort of angry or outwardly showing that much anger or what have you. I mean, he qualified 16th. Newgarden qualified 25th.
Unless someone
right?
runs into him, then he gets pretty mad.
Right. But the nerve, right? The audacity of this fan who was behind Will Power's pit stand wearing a Scott Dixon shirt asked Will for an autograph. Will obliged. Will was walking back to his pit stand, presumably to do the engineering debrief, right? Then was asked for a picture in that same gaggle. Obliged.
Oh, wow.
Did not oblige Kevin Lee on the Peacock broadcast for an interview. Politely declined that. Joseph Newgarden did accommodate that request for an interview, but I just thought it was a funny set of circumstances. Will came off. He was mad. You could see his face. He was gesturing and he had the arms flailing and everything else, and then goes over and signs an autograph, then walks away, and then goes back and takes a picture, and then comes back all aggrieved still. I thought that this is IndyCar racing, right? Because you don't get this level of interaction with the fans, I believe, in any other sport out there, any other top level, motorsports like this.
Yeah.
But that just kind of tickled me. What did not tickle me is seeing the pursuer, which is, Joseph Newgarden, have yet again a very poor qualifying effort. And then to add salt to that wound, he, of course, had the engine change, which is what put him further behind. That's actually what pushed him into 25th starting position. And when you start back there, Tim, bad things happen, and we're going to talk about that here shortly. But what I do want to talk about before we move out of qualifying is if you look at the Fast Six, again, surprises all around. 2 Rahals, 2 Arrow McLarens, and 2 Andretti. Right? And if you compare that, if you cross-reference that against your best Ganassi, which is your guy, right? Armstrong, 7th. And the best Penske, which is McLaughlin, who's having a good back half of the year here, qualified 11th.
Yeah. They just missed it completely. I'm referring to the Penskes.
Totally missed it.
Ganassi,
kind of surprising too, that, but that Palou or Dixon weren't better, that neither Palou nor Dixon weren't better in that. And it was the rookie, right? It was his second visit, so not necessarily a rookie still, but the rookie outqualified his much more seasoned teammates in that situation. Overall, though, what do you think?
Well, something was happening, right? You got Rahal on pole. Your best Andretti car is Devlin. Your best Ganassi car is Armstrong. And you got Penske in the back of the pack, we'll call it. So, and even if you look at Arrow, you have Rossi beating out everybody else, which I guess isn't a huge surprise, but typically you see Pato up there. So I'm not sure
I think Felix is your qualifying, specialist at that team. He's been, at least.
Yeah. So something was off. Something in my prediction with the axis and coming off, something was utterly strange with qualifying, but I think it's great. I think that's what makes the series, right? You never know what's going to happen. And look, here's the other thing I want to say, because I predicted this coming, but I was not allowed to do predictions last week for whatever reason. So Rahal was on my list.
Oh yeah.
And if you believe that, you're very gullible.
I don't.
Not on my list.
I would be shocked if you had Rahal on your list ever. So, but I think it's good for the series, Tim. I think it's good for the series to see kind of the quote unquote best of the rest, getting some time at the front of the grid. Some of this could be 2 races at this track in a season, which I think this is going to be the last year for that. I think that's fairly certain. But which brings a ton of familiarity to the teams. So the teams know what they're up against. Yeah, it's kind of a weather dependent track. We know that. It's very smooth, and they're very familiar with it. So, not surprising that some of those teams that we don't normally see in that Firestone Fast Six.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that, you're surprised that Penske's so off. Like,
yeah, smooth tracks.
You're so
right?
familiar with it. Yeah.
they like more, more,
Street courses, bumpy
difficult. Yeah.
courses.
More difficult setups, I guess, is what Penske's more on. So our friend Gacker, right, who's I would consider to be a casual IndyCar fan, texted me, and I'm going to paraphrase. He's like, how did RL turn it around like this? And Tim, my only response that I could think of right off the bat was, good question.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What do you think it is?
Well, I think they had a baseline coming from the May race, and they stuck with it. And I think they've done some R&D since then, and they've got the new, technical director, and I think it's just starting to come together. Even though I don't feel that, if you listen to the last episode, I don't feel like the message is very good over there when it comes to driver interviews and what they're saying about the cars, but something clicked. And so I think it has to do with the personnel that they put in management, and maybe Bobby being more involved after the Indy 500 debacle that took place. So maybe he stepped in and is not sitting back, as I sort of presume prior to. So I think all of that kind of goes into it. And I think it's just a learning lesson, right? And I think they've got it, but you think they have it, and then they come out and they don't do very well. But you got to even look at Toronto and go, what did they figure out in Toronto that others didn't? I don't know.
There's moments of brilliance. The team is plenty capable. They've just not been able to put the pieces together, right? They have this wonderful new shop, and they've got these, very smart engineering minds and technical capabilities. And they've got a guy from, Red Bull F1, McLaren F1, who's, in charge of their technical engineering, and it's bound to come together at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of newness. I think also in the past, the team has been a little quick to pull the trigger, or quick to make changes and find the next best thing that they think is out there, or next best person that's out there, and plug that in, and not really give it time to, to bed in. Yeah. And I think they're taking a little more measured approach. I think they're doing it definitely smart. Because they've turned it around in mid-season, Tim, and we don't see that.
Yeah,
you don't see that.
And I'm curious how much IMSA has to do with this too, under the same roof in the new facility. And you've got those engineers, you got your engineers, and is there some cross-functional, meetings talking about development of the cars and where it could go? And have you looked at this? Maybe there's looking at telemetry and data points that make sense to bring in, and maybe they got a simulator that they're doing a lot of sim work in order to get stuff sort of ironed out.
Yeah, along those same lines, I would tell you, I track with you 100% on that. I think that management, including Bobby Rahal, is probably taking a little stronger approach with them. I think that everybody, with the people that were dismissed, and you hate to hear that people were dismissed, but it happens, with the people that were dismissed, and the people that remain, were probably told, hey, look, you have to speak up. Okay. If you have an idea, if you have something that needs to be tried, if there's something that we need to look at differently, I think everything, it needs to be on the table at this point, mm-hmm. right? Because they were not getting anywhere. They were a serial backmarker. Mm-hmm. And to the point where the scion of the team, it was talking retirement a month ago.
Yeah. Right? Maybe it's management is more opening to listening to the guys on the crew. Yeah. It could be a total shift throughout that is now, more collaborative, in the fact that we're going to listen and we're going to try things, and maybe we're going to try things in small intervals and not make huge leaps and just throw stuff at the wall. Let's have some data that supports the change we're doing. If you got data to support it, then I think you make it and go with it. I think it's important that you get it right off the truck, because these weekends aren't what they used to be.
Too short. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too short. If you're bad off the truck, you're going to be bad.
Yeah. You don't have time to fix it unless you inadvertently miss something. You're like, oh, this is what it is. We forgot to do that. Like, I don't know. Maybe they're documenting stuff differently. I have no idea, but they got to figure out the robo package next, right? Mm-hmm. That's got to be next on the list. I think you got to continue to develop road courses, even though you've done well at Indianapolis twice. I think you got to just look at everything and go, how did we do? You seem to have brought some of your street savvy to the street courses. At least it happened in Toronto, which is pretty bumpy. remember cars were taking different lines than your normal line just to avoid bumps. So,
In
you went from a
Detroit, which was just like a relatively few weeks earlier, right? Small period of
terrible.
time, they were awful.
Yeah.
They were way
So,
off the mark, right? They were in a different state.
yeah.
And so
So
for them to turn it around at Toronto, which I mean, again, we don't know the nuances of the tracks and how similar or how dissimilar they are, but the fact that they were able to turn it around that quickly on a bumpy street course, it's kind of miraculous.
yeah, I would say from our perspective
Mm-hmm.
or from a fan's perspective, there's no difference in those tracks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would tell you
Yeah.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think
be
maybe
curious to know.
you go from asphalt to concrete to manhole cover to this,
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think it's the same, both ways around. Again, Detroit, you have that long straightaway, and Toronto, you have a pretty long one too, as well. So
Yeah.
it's not, I think they're pretty similar.
Yep. Um, moving on to the race. I don't know how you can start any race review without talking about right this dive bomb move by Devlin DeFrancesco to go from fifth to first.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky to kind of make it into that first turn. Maybe Graham was a little bit tentative because he had some braking issues in the weekend prior and leading up to this thing. But yeah, Devlin, who has nothing to lose at this point, right? Because we know he's not going to be back with Andretti
Mm-hmm.
next year. Makes that big move. I mean, at the end of the day, it didn't really pay off for him. Whatever befell him later on in the race. Started fifth, finished 19th. He was the darling of the first 3 laps, and then after that, forget it. Didn't see much
Yeah,
going
a
on there.
brilliant move. Coming on the
Lucky.
outside, you don't have much to lose if you're on the outside diving real deep. If you go too deep, you're off the track. You're not taking anybody out, but you get it woed down enough to make the corner, and then you leave Graham on the inside who can't, take the corner as you would normally the normal racing line. So he has to back out, and Devlin takes the lead, and you get a yellow, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and then he
Mm-hmm.
leads several laps, but still lacking pace though.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You start it in fifth, you go to first, and then by the end of the day, you're 19th.
Yeah. I think the Andretti cars were okay here. And I think that was part of it, right? Like Devlin was okay and maybe got a little lucky in qualifying, which was unusual, but he settled into, I think, where the Andretti team kind of settled into. I think the Andretti's were a little behind in this race.
I
But to
agree
your
with
point,
that,
right?
but
Go ahead.
you out qualify everybody and you finish last on the
In the team
list
chart.
of
Yeah.
drivers. Yeah. So
Further back in the grid on that start, it would land Dixon, Grosjean, Armstrong, Herta, and the person you least want to see bad luck happen, Joseph Newgarden. And Joseph Newgarden, of course, winds up on Marcus Armstrong's Simon Cancer Center Chip Ganassi Honda. And he's out and he's begging them to get him off that car and back on the ground so he doesn't have to lose a lap, which he ultimately did. This crash, this kind of, I don't know if I want to call it a crash. I mean, this kind of tie up, right, was caused by Palou. I mean, he just took it 4 wide on the inside and inside a couple of McLarens. I didn't see who else was in that, but he took it 4 wide and caused some issues there, right? Caused some spinning and saw some turning around. And,
I think the person I feel worse for is Armstrong. You out qualify all your teammates, and then you get turned around in turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is.
7.
7. And from there you're trying to make up time. So I think that's huge, right? So I get it that you go a lap down, and then once you're lap down, you're sort of hung out to dry at that point. Obviously I feel bad for Newgarden, but I feel like you had enough time to react. That's happened way.
Should have, yeah. But I think, in Townsend Bell, I'm not going to go on a Townsend Bell tangent. Townsend Bell had a good point on because my wife even said it, right? When she was watching that, she was like, how did he not see that coming up? And it's like, what we're looking at on the onboard camera is much higher than what Joseph's looking at. And he's looking through that aero screen with, right, a divider in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's happening in milliseconds. It's not right. You're not just tooling up to, something at, main and third at 35 miles an hour where you're like, oh, no, you're going 170 miles an hour.
Swerve.
Yeah. In the, at the back of a straightaway into a very hard left-hand turn. So, in his defense, I don't know that he really had much to do there or could go anywhere. I mean, especially with where Marcus was sort of.
Yeah, right in the middle of the track. But I think at some point, I think you look at that opportunity and you see it as one to gain a bunch of positions. So I'm going to go for this area and I think I can get 5-6 positions. I'm way back in 25th starting. So maybe it's being a little too aggressive, but maybe it's to your point and maybe it's to Townsend's point. You just can't see
the circumstance.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel bad, but when that happens and then you see the frantic get me going and here comes the pace car.
Come on.
Yeah. Get me going. Yeah. And even they were saying it's going to take a while to untangle them just because of, one car being on top of the other and you go a lap down.
They can't just push them off, right? Because you're going to, that could ruin the car totally. So, you can't just push them off, but
I don't think you or I expected a whole lot out of Newgarden on this track anyway. So I don't, you got to look at where the other Penske's finished, right? Will Power looks
top
like
10,
6th,
top 15, kind of, yeah.
But, with
they weren't good in May.
7th, you're still not going to gain any ground.
Right. No, but you didn't give it up like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, in this whole little melee, I think the people who least were affected, of course, spoiler alert, Scott Dixon, who ends up winning this race, was involved there, but he kept the car going. He was lucky to spin in the grass. Which means he didn't need the AMR safety team, so he could take care of himself and get himself out of there. And Herta had a flat tire, so he was still able to limp it around and get service and come back in. But he had service in a closed pit, which necessitated a penalty. So he had to start from the back of the field anyway. He was already back there, but he got further back. Herta's day never really came to fruition there, which again, I'm scratching my head looking at Herta's year with only 3 races to go. He finished this in 13th. He finished this in 13th. Dixon won.
It's just raw pace, right? The Dixon had great pace. You pit lap 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, to get fuel. Because I agree with Graham a little bit that I thought that yellow was longer than what it needed to be.
What it wasn't like track cleanup. It wasn't like a lot of debris or anything that they nobody leaked fluids or anything like that. It was what 6. It was 6. 6 laps, and they're long laps.
I know. That surprised me. And
2.5 miles basically, right? Let's round it up. It's 2.5 miles. That's a long track to take six laps for them to clean that up. It makes no sense to me. Yeah. Do I think it impacted the end of this race? I do not. But the fact that it was that long was absurd.
Well, I think it gives you that many more miles under yellow that you can pit and refuel and make that strategy work, which the only way you're going to do it is you got to have a good car. And obviously Dixon had a good car, and you got to be a disciplined driver to get the mileage you need in order to make it work. Yeah. And, it didn't even seem like he was in it. And then he was.
Yeah. I mean, he was lurking, right?
I know. Brilliant drive. And I don't mean to get off track, but that's a brilliant, brilliant drive. Something really cool to see. So when I asked you earlier, were you rooting for Graham? When I was seeing what was going on, I was like, this is going to be really good. And
totally was.
I'm rooting for the guy that's making
I'll give you 2 things here when we get to it, but I have a couple of things in mind. I was totally rooting for Graham. You know that. I'm inclined to say, Tim, this is it for Joseph Newgarden's championship chances. I believe that coming into this race. I've been saying that for a couple of weeks. But he's 105 points behind now in 3rd place, which more on that later. Even if he wins Gateway, which, all the talking heads and podcasters, believe he will. But it doesn't matter. He's in a fight for 2nd place again.
Yeah. There's the championship's over. It was over last week. I think it was over the week before, but it doesn't help, as you will run down later, how much of a lead Palou has now.
Yeah. Rossi was strong early, although this is a strong track for Alexander. He won here last year
Mm-hmm.
to break a long wind drought before leaving Andretti. So, and he had some really good racing with Christian Lundgaard in the early stage of this thing. And I got to tell you, we've talked already a lot about Graham. Mentioned Christian with that second place qualifying, but man, he has elevated that 45. Right. I mean, he really has. He's elevated that program. He's done really well. He has a win on the season, obviously, with Toronto, but he's also starting to look like those guys who expect to win week in and week out, or expect to be in contention week in and week out, because he wasn't happy with that fourth place finish.
No, not at all. He was not happy with it.
He was aggravated with that.
But you have a pit stop that lasts forever.
He did. And what's funny is he didn't mention that. He mentioned the timing of the pit stop. He didn't mention the fact that it was an 11-second stop when it should be about a 7.5 second stop.
Yeah,
he didn't mention that. Yeah, something with fuel. But while Rossi and Lundgaard were going at it, it helped Graham build a lead there. And he needed some help in the back, and they weren't helping him. They were racing each other. But Graham needed some help because he was on primaries. He didn't have a second set of reds like everybody else did because he had blistered some reds in either practice and qualifying. But he had blistered his reds, and so Graham had to make the best out of that run on the primaries. Graham was good. He was good on primaries. He was good on used reds.
Yeah, he was good. And throughout the entire stint, there was no slouch. So
that car never fell apart.
For those
in the back of my mind, I was rooting for Graham, but I felt like it wasn't the strategy or Dixon was just going to plain beat him. I kind of felt the car was just going to fall off.
But never did.
Never did. Which means they cleaned that up from the May road course as well.
Yeah. So. And for those who would believe that Graham no longer has it, gosh, you look at this race and you go, he still's got it. And for years,
I was said that he doesn't have it anymore.
You've always said that. I was always
he's a great racer. He's smart. He's no dum-dum. I mean, he's a smart racer.
I just didn't think he was fast.
Just struggling. The team isn't fast. So while all this was going on, nobody was paying attention to the Iceman, who was the Ironman this weekend. But, he was the Iceman. Nobody paying attention, involved in that first lap issue that we discussed. By lap 40, he was 7th. Here's my favorite part. Lap 60, he's in 12th. When he takes the lead? Lap 64. And he stays there till lap 85.
Yeah.
Right?
Man.
This is him
and Mike Hall.
4th? I know. They got it.
They totally got it. And when you think they're down and out,
forget it.
He hasn't won the season. And he even asked, did you have doubts you'd get your win? He's like, well, you always got doubts, right?
Yeah.
To keep it at 19 consecutive seasons, which is next on the list.
Honest answer.
Yeah. It's just, it's just how life is. So for them to pull this, I'm overly impressed with this win, and maybe I'm overreacting to this, but I think it comes down to a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of knowledge on how to run that race in order to make it work. They did it. They totally did it.
54th career victory, 19 consecutive seasons with a win, 21 seasons overall with wins. And it comes on his 319th start, which is now an all-time record, beating his friend Tony Kanaan.
Great storyline.
Right?
Great win. I don't know if anybody else can do it in the paddock. You look at how good he is, how Hall of Fame-ish he is. Hall of Fame-ish, I don't think that's a word, but he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, and he's got great wins. I think.
Yeah, Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, he's on his face is on the rock.
Yeah,
if you want to call it that.
What's interesting to me is, and I'll tell you this. So I was rooting for Graham, and what I was keeping my eye on was IndyCar timing and scoring, which anybody can go to. You don't have to be a media member, which we do get media access through IndyCar. You don't have to be a media member, but IndyCar timing and scoring was predicting that Dixon was going to be 4 laps short on fuel. Graham was not. Graham was good to go. Dixon prediction, 4 laps short on fuel. Graham needed to chase Dixon down, and then had to come around Canapino, had to come around Ryan Hunter-Ray, which I did not put in the notes. I don't necessarily want to talk about it. If you want to see my thoughts on it, go to Twitter, but or the social media app formerly known as Twitter. But it's in there. But only Scott Dixon, when you look at that, is the one that you look at this prediction and say, he's probably going to be fine. So he could save tires, he could save fuel. He was leading, so he had clean air. He could take care of the car and do everything he needed to, while Graham had to push and make every lap count, make every pass count, make every corner count. And by the time he gets to Dixon can fight him effectively.
He saved his tires. Because he's saved his fuel.
Yeah.
And was able to, he was still feathering it when Graham was closing. He was feathering it to make sure that he had enough fuel for the really lap and a half dogfight when Graham caught him.
Yeah. I would love to have another IndyCar driver on this podcast, because here's a question I have that I noticed on this broadcast was Dixon seemed, for lack of a better term, conservative in some of the bigger corners, which I feel backed up Graham. So then Dixon could get on it earlier than Graham could, because Graham had to react to Dixon sort of being a little slower into some of those corners, and Dixon could control the pace. So he could get the dig and come right out under acceleration, where Graham had to react to that slower than maybe normal corner, which puts Graham off of his rhythm, and then back on. Especially into that turn 1 section, into that turn 7 section, where it looks like, hey, it almost feels like he's being conservative, but not to a point where Graham could take advantage of it, because he's just throwing Graham off of his rhythm.
Yeah, and
so Graham has to kind of react to it. Can't dive bomb or can't do anything there. Say that again. I didn't hear it.
I was going to say, and Dixon knows where to put the car. To make sure that Graham can't get a run in those areas that he does slow down, which presumably, to your point, could be to mess Graham's rhythm up. But at the same time, I think a little bit of it initially was, I got to save a little fuel here as well. So I can lift a little bit, but I can still stay in front, and it's going to mess Graham up at that point. And then Graham even said, he's like, down the straightaway, I couldn't even catch him because Dixon gets on the gas sooner. Graham's off rhythm, to your point, and therefore it opens a 7-car gap, and you can't close that in the straightaway.
And Dixon knows that Graham is smart and seasoned and isn't going to do anything dumb to ruin both of their races. Right. So if it's somebody else, and I'm not thinking anybody, I'm just saying, if it's somebody else, he knows that there's not that level of desperation back there. Graham wants that win. There's no doubt. But Graham isn't going to throw away that second place by pulling a 5th to 1st in that first turn, right at the closing stages of this race. He's not going to do that. And
you wouldn't think so, but it's been so long since you've been in victory lane, you might take a chance that you normally wouldn't. But the team's been poor for so long that you take your second, you move on.
Yeah,
smart thing to do.
And for Graham, right? I mean, it has to be in Graham's mind. I don't know if he knew the dates particularly, but this is the best finish since 2020 for Graham. Again, the IMS road course, and second place to Scott Dixon.
Yeah. Well, you would have loved to win from the pole. You led a lot of the laps, right? I don't know the exact number.
36.
But,
led the
so
most.
You're up front. Yeah. And your pace was never off. You couldn't beat the Iceman. And there's nothing to be ashamed about that. When he's on, and they were on, and again, he hasn't been there all season like this, but they put it together.
Look, here's the thing. Chip Ganassi Racing is the benchmark program on that grid.
Yeah.
And I'm a Penske guy, right? But Chip Ganassi Racing is the benchmark program on that grid. And for Graham to really chase down Dixon the way he did, still have something left to keep him honest at the closing stages of this race, that's a great accomplishment. I mean, I look at it like you could almost treat it like a win. I know that Graham sees it differently. How do you? I know you're not big on moral victories, but how do you see this?
For the team, I think so. I think it's a disappointment though, just because you're on pole.
So good.
If you're not on pole,
doesn't guarantee win.
let's say you have a fifth place start and you go through the field and you finish second. You feel good about that, right? But you start on pole, you have the pace, you have the car that you have, and you just sort of get outdueled by a pitch strategy and a fuel save, and that's disappointing. Even if it's a second place and it's a podium, you still enjoy it, I think, and you still obviously congratulate the team. You do throw a party for the team, I would think, based on this one, and but deep down, racers want to win. That's all they want to do.
For sure. Third place for Pato Award. I honestly don't know where this came from, because to me, looking at this race, Rossi was the best of the three.
Well, Rossi, something happened middle of the race
place for him. It just,
yeah,
maybe it went away. Maybe it was fuel save. Maybe it was, tire wear or something.
Terrible, I think.
Yeah. But Award was nowhere to be found. I don't know how that even happened.
But he was happy with the finish. He knew he didn't have the car. He was like, he's
growing,
good.
Tim.
Yeah, this is what the car had. He's like, I don't even think the car had this, right? But we were able to pull this off and get a podium. So he was like, yeah, it was okay. But so you take that and you move on. And to your point, growing up, understanding what you can and can't take from the car and what it will take, and getting a good finish is what it's about. That's how you go for a championship, right? You have finishes like this when a car probably wasn't as good as a third place car.
Yeah. Well said. Nothing to add, because I totally agree. Fourth place, Lundgaard, as I said earlier, I mean, he's elevated that program. He's now a solid 8th in the championship, and with some races coming up that, he'll be a contender. We've mentioned that. I mean,
it's good.
Maybe not Gateway, but Portland and Laguna, I think for sure he'll be a contender. He wasn't happy, and we've talked about that. He wasn't happy with the strategy. He felt that they pitted too early, which put him out of contention. I don't know if I agree or disagree with that. I think the 11-second stop wasn't good for him. I mean, 4 seconds when the field is this tight.
Yeah,
it's
that
just
puts you behind Pato, and then you're running behind Pato trying to catch him, and you're in dirty air, and being in dirty air doesn't do anything for you. So he wasn't far behind.
And you have Pato Rossi right behind you, which means you can't take your eye off the ball one bit, because Rossi will bite you.
Absolutely. So you just got to run with it, unfortunately. But the 11 seconds, that's what gets you out of the podium spot. And I would be upset too. That shouldn't happen. Something with the fuel nozzle going in and the vent not opening.
Yeah. Sixth place goes to Will Power, who started 16th. So Will did what Will does. I mean, he maximized his opportunities, ran a smart race, didn't do anything dumb, and brought it home. Pelot sandwich really with the Penske's there. It was Will and Pelot and McLaughlin. Yeah. Which again, we said last week, or the last podcast, was when Will is good, it almost seems like McLaughlin and Newgarden struggle a little bit. And I mean, McLaughlin was the better qualifier, but Will was the better finisher. Which is where you earn your points, right? So there's that. And then, rounding out your top 10 is Kirkwood in 9th. And based on just reading between the lines, and I might be putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 18.5, but Kirkwood almost looked thankful and sort of bewildered as to, how that 9th place finish worked out for him. And then 10th for Ericsson. Yeah,
it goes to your point. Andretti was just off on setup.
Yeah,
just didn't work.
Yep.
And you got to congratulate Pelot on just taking 7th. Take what you can get.
It's what the car gave him.
Yep. You got a huge lead in the championship. Just bring it home. You already know Newgarden's out on lap 1. Lap down, most likely never going to get it back, and didn't. And so you cruise around a 7th, which is interesting because he dominated in the spring, as we mentioned, and to not come through the field and to have Dixon have the pace in order to, make that strategy work. You wonder how good the car was or how bad it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he had the bump right earlier. So, I mean, you never know if that threw anything off. I mean, the cars are so close. If your settings are off, I imagine just millimeters, it would cause some issues. So moving on with from there, I mean, kind of taking a look at the grid and where everything is, I mean, I mentioned earlier that Newgarden is third place in the championship. He's just 4 points behind Dixon with 3 races to go. But again, just the culmination of a very inconsistent season. Newgarden has 4 wins on the season. Dixon just got his first, and Dixon is second in the championship.
Yeah,
ahead of Newgarden.
Yeah,
he shouldn't even be in the conversation, to be honest. I mean, if that season was a little bit more consistent, right? Palou has 4 wins, and he's running away with the championship.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's all Joseph though. I think Penske's been on or off, and not great qualifying positions at times. They just have not been there for whatever reason, which is pretty amazing. Obviously, they dominate on the ovals, but other than that, it's kind of been hit or miss for them. So you win 4 times. They're all on ovals, street and road courses. Who knows?
Yeah,
but
you're kind of, yeah.
Fingers
crossed on those, right? Those situations.
Seems
you know
like
you're going to go in with the ovals and be super strong, and that's kind of where that is. But, I mean, his teammates, Joseph Newgarden's teammates, have been very good on those courses. Power and McLaughlin. I mean, McLaughlin was in contention for a win in St. Pete right off the bat.
True. So, absolutely right. Yep. So wrecked it.
And with Grosjean. Speaking of Grosjean, I mean, does Joseph need a little of that Grosjean medicine? I mean, if you recall, Michael talking publicly to the Indianapolis Star saying, hey, when it's an 8th place car, take 8th instead of doing something dumb and finishing 28th.
Yeah. You got to do what Palou did.
Right. Is that kind of the Newgarden? I don't see Newgarden being reckless. He's not wrecky, which is my favorite term, but he's just, when he's bad, it's bad, right? I almost feel like they rely a little too much on aggressive strategy as opposed to what's happening in front of you, right? This is my perspective as a fan, and I've got a podcast and a microphone. I almost feel like some of these races where they qualify poorly, I feel like they're just too aggressive. Where if you look at the 12 pit just, to me looks like they say, we'll play it as it lies, right? If it's on the green, or if it's on the fairway, we'll hit, right?
Yeah.
We'll hit a long iron here. If it's just off the side, we're going to pull out the rescue. Where I feel like they're going for the irons every time, even in the tall grass. It seems like to me on the Newgarden. On the Newgarden stand, it just seems like overly aggressive, and it's not paying out.
Yeah, and he just gets pouty, and he doesn't drive well when he pouts.
I don't dig that at all.
I think that's I think that's the whole thing. Like, when the car's not good, it's not good, and it's not bringing it home in a position to just get some points, and that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Look at what Power did last year. 1 win and won the championship.
Won the championship. Yep.
So,
now Dixon's got 1 win and could very well steal 2nd place from Newgarden.
Yeah, Palou just rolled off 4 wins in 5 races, and then had good finishes everywhere else.
Yeah,
didn't throw.
I still think he's got 1 more win in him before the end of the season.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think he's still got 1 more win in him. Tim, my memory serves, and I was going to look this up, but I feel okay with it because Spencer will tell us if I'm wrong, which I'm totally good with. Didn't Scott Dixon get a victory last year when the Alex Palou contract situation hit the fan?
I think he might have, yeah. Didn't he?
That was Toronto, right? Won in Toronto after the Palou thing kind of hit. Well, guess what? Dixon won this weekend. You know what else hit the fan? Palou contract situation.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
Totally.
Silly season is not only long, but sillier as of just a few days ago. Alex Palou has made Arrow McLaren aware of his intention not to drive for the team in 2024. What's interesting, though, is I seem to recall I've been hearing that somewhere, that it wasn't 100%.
I've been hearing it on this podcast for a long,
that's it.
long
right
time.
Here. Yes.
I thought you were crazy.
Yeah. I was skeptical.
I still think you're crazy, but you were right on that one.
Yeah. Oh, I'm completely crazy. I mean, certifiable. But I wasn't crazy about that.
No, that was a great call.
Yeah. But I've tweeted about this since Friday here and there, and I'm sure we'll we'll get more of the story, and we'll see what McLaren feels their recourse is.
But I don't know if he's staying with Ganassi though.
Oh, I do. I do.
I know you do.
I know, yeah, because you get to see the notes ahead of time. But yeah. So, but here's the question: if Palou was forbidden by his Ganassi contract to sign with anybody before September 1st, what did he have in agreement with McLaren other than, dude, I'm there next year. I'm there next year. I'm there next year. I got it.
Could have been, right?
I got it, right?
That's all it could be. Maybe nothing signed, just a letter of intent.
And McLaren, I mean, yeah, maybe a letter of intent, but if McLaren's paying out a significant, right, according to them, quote unquote, significant sum, a first payment or whatever, why? The guy's not wearing your shirt yet. He's wearing your F1 shirt. That's a different deal, though. Mm-hmm. They ain't wearing your shirt yet. Ain't sending you your car
deal's yet. Off now. Everything's done, right?
Everything's. I would imagine he's not going to be invited to be the reserve driver in those final F1 races after Laguna.
But you show up to F1 all in.
I know, which bothers you more than it bothers me. It doesn't bother me at all.
Oh my gosh, it's
yeah. So, but I guess we'll see. I mean, we'll see how it works out. I mean, I would assume he's staying. I would tell you that nothing is 100%, but I'd bet money on he's staying with Ganassi. And here's the other thing. I'm glad he dumped this management company, this other management, or vice versa. If they dumped him, good. See ya, dude. You know, because as far as the advice or the things that they were trying to pull and some of the things that they were going around, it was stinky. It didn't feel right. So I saw Roger Yasukawa during the broadcast, and Roger Yasukawa was the one that brought him to Coyne, brought him to Ganassi. So it's good to see, and Roger's a former IndyCar driver. So it's good to see Roger back there. Maybe that'll help clean some of this stuff up, because you know what? Here's the deal. He signs a 2 or 3 year deal with Ganassi and starts snooping around, or somebody else starts snooping around. I would say from a credibility standpoint, this is his last opportunity to play this card. Because if it happens the next time around, it's a Palou problem.
Yeah.
Right? Not a management team problem.
Yeah.
That's what I would tell you.
Yeah.
Can I give you one more silly season innuendo on this thing?
Yeah, please do.
DHL to Ganassi. Palou primary sponsor.
Think that's going on?
I do.
That's your prediction here.
That's my wild
I'm not convinced
prediction.
He's staying with Ganassi. He may have a different F1 ride or something. He's been so good. Somebody's got to be looking at him to bring him up. And I don't know who it is.
Helmet Marco Helmet cannot help himself. So if he was signing Palou to run in AlphaTauri, Helmet Marco would have said something by now. I believe.
I don't know. I guess
Total Wolf might have said something by now with Palou going to Williams.
He's got to get a shot, in my opinion, though. And I don't know when that's going to be if you're staying with Ganassi. Maybe it does happen, and you would rattle off numerous names that have gone from Ganassi to F1. So you think there's still an opportunity. I just think now is your opportunity. You got 2 championships in 3 seasons, I believe, if my math is right. Obviously, 3 with Ganassi, the first one being with Coyne, as you mentioned. So the kid's good, man. He is brilliant. So he's got to get a run. So I don't know if it's next year, if it's the year after. But maybe he stays with Ganassi. Maybe they've made things come together. They've mended their issues that they had. And
DHL comes over and makes him the highest pay in Honda, because that's the other thing, right? So we'll talk about that. DHL comes over. Maybe NTT comes back because they were expecting Palou at McLaren. Yeah. Maybe NTT comes back to Ganassi, and they make him NTT and Honda potentially. Makes Palou the highest paid driver on the grid. And how do you walk away from that? Yeah.
He deserves it.
And Honda doesn't want to let that go. Honda will be a engine supplier again in Formula One in the not too distant future at Aston Martin, which could have a seat available for one Alex Palou if they want to happen.
If Honda's going to stay with him, right? If Honda says, here's the plan, here's the roadmap, here's what we're going to do. This is our formal plan for you as we look to Formula One. that crossed my mind as well, and that's a great point. So maybe it is do another year at Ganassi and then transfer over. So
yeah,
he's gonna go. It's just a matter of when.
yeah, and where. More silly season news. Maybe, one of the ones that I believe was expected was Meyer Shank this week confirmed 4-time Indianapolis 500 winner Elio Castroneves will be dancing his way into an Indy 500 only program with Tom Blomqvist filling the 06 seat full-time from their IMSA program.
Yeah, I like that move. It's a good move.
Yeah. I think what's surprising, though, was this move by Elio as a minority owner in the team.
Yeah,
that surprises me.
It's interesting, though. Yeah, it's surprising, but you think of it though. You're Meyer Shank, racing, right? So Michael Shank, and then he brings you your first Indy 500 victory. I think
I'm sure he's
bring him
great
on,
with
right?
sponsors, right?
Yeah.
He's great in those, kissing hands and shaking baby situations where you go out there and do
best.
that. I don't think there's anybody better, right? Right. So, so why not keep him on? And that's the way you keep him on as a part-time owner and driver
move.
coach, which
I think it's a smart move.
Okay. Oh, it's very smart. What we don't know is plans for the 60. And out of respect for Simon, I think we kind of know, right? I think out of respect for Simon, some of that timing, I'm sure is sensitive at this point, but I think even prior to Simon's, situation coming out of Mid-Ohio, that horrible wreck at Mid-Ohio, I don't think it was likely Simon was coming back to the 60.
Yeah, you had thought prior to that he was going to do the IMSA program, and then they were going to fill someone else in that seat.
Yep, and he would go there.
And I think we know who that someone else is going to be. I wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
You think it's another Quist? In this case, a Lundqvist, Linus Lundqvist, the snubbed Indy Lights champ from 2022.
He's been good as well.
12th place, Tim, at Indy this weekend. Yes, and then he was doing well in Toronto, and then Toronto'd him. It just kind of bit him.
Yeah, it's just a rookie mistake. But man, he was on pace. He was, as everybody says, he was as fast as below, and so on and so forth. So I think you sign that kid up. If you haven't done it already, I think you need to start inking that and get it done. Yeah, because that kid's good.
What is interesting, because you and I are IMSA fans, we've done the Daytona 24 Hours the last couple of years, is what happens to Shank's program in IMSA, because that's not confirmed. And
you've been mentioning that.
Again, I can't help but feel like the cheating scandal from the Daytona 24 this year, which it was Acura that blew that whistle. It makes you wonder. And Michael Andretti is already on record with, Wayne Taylor Racing saying we're going to expand to 2 cars. So maybe that Acura, formerly under Meyer Shank, goes to Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti Autosport.
Good.
Which leaves Shank looking at a possible customer program with Porsche, which he's not been a customer program in INSA. He's been a factory team or some other opportunity. Who knows? But that's tough for me to swallow there.
You think his IndyCar program might go to Chevrolet?
I think it's possible. He has one more year with Andretti with this engineering agreement, but it's possible.
But if he could do an engineering it's the fallout from McLaren. The Acura scandal that trickles down to IndyCar potentially, then
because call it Acura if you want, but it's Honda.
Yeah, one of the same.
Yeah. Timmy, did you see Kyle Larson's livery for the Indy 500 attempt next year?
I did. After I read the notes, I went out there and checked it out.
What'd you think?
Terrible.
It looks like a Scott Dixon chassis with new decals on it.
Yeah, it's
can't help but feel like is that just Zach Brown just tweaking Chip Ganassi again? Like
who knows?
So just kind of
he's gonna put PNC on it.
Yeah. Hendrick cars. Hey, but if Mr. H is running the or writing the check and he decides that's what that car should, because it's very un-McLaren like. If that's what Mr. H wants that car to look like, then that's what
I had to go look, and it's not impressive by any means.
No.
I know they put it
just
side by
gonna leave it
side
at
with
that.
the NASCAR, the stock car, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, I see why it is the livery, but it doesn't do a
Doesn't do
whole
it for
lot
me.
for me. I'm looking at it right
Yeah,
now. It looks like a Scott Dixon car for sure.
it does. Yeah. In other Aero McLaren news, 3 senior level personnel departures coming up here at the end of the season. First, Billy Vincent, who is Felix Rosenquist's strategist, informed the team that he'll be leaving after the season finale on September 10th. Vincent has only been there since October of 2022 as one of the key team leaders to help steer Aero McLaren in this reorganized structure as they expanded. To me, this kind of feels to me like Felix is leaving and taking his strategist with him.
Interesting. Where do you think this is going?
Rahal.
Hmm.
That's
Could
what
happen, right?
that's what I think. And why not? Right? Take your strategist. It's who you're comfortable with. Good relationship with him. And maybe
Yeah.
that guy brings some of the things that are good at the McLaren program and bring him over to Rahal and help share some of that knowledge, right? Bring some of that institutional knowledge.
More silly season going on here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the story does go on to discuss that Billy Vincent has kind of a racing company and, you know, does some other things and helps support some other series and things. So maybe it's just that. Like I said, I mean, you know, I'm just speculating here, but it could just be that. It could also be that he's jumping ship with Felix going to somewhere, and somewhere could
Your
be
best
Rahal.
guess is RLL.
Yeah. Because if you believed that Pelot was going to McLaren up until last weekend, up until just a few days ago, right? And Rosenquist knew he was going to be out of a job, and he got a nice offer from somewhere to be a paid driver.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you agree to that?
Yeah.
So, and he's been on the hot seat anyway, not necessarily because of performance, but because he was just a seat filler until Pelot came.
Yeah.
You know, which means
And
if
that's not a
Felix got a
position
nice
anybody wants to be
offer,
in.
exactly. So why wouldn't you? And take your guy with you. Further on that, Jeff Darks, who's Aero McLaren's VP of Marketing Operations, he's been with that team since 2019, which means he was Sam Schmidt. He was there. He's listed September 1st as his final day, as well as Mark Myers, who is McLaren's Director of Partnerships. Kind of goes hand in hand, right? The marketing and the partnerships. You know, again, I'll speculate because, you know, I have a podcast and I've got this thing in front of me, so I can. They're probably consolidating some of those operations with the broader team, you know, which, I mean, Tim, the company I work for was bought out by a company a few years ago, and that's one of those services that generally tend to get sort of, you know, combined, and you peel off the redundancies, and that could be one of those
people doing the same thing.
Yeah, that could be one of those functions that, you know, Aero McLaren sees as a redundancy. So championship standings, nothing, you know, main changes here. Dixon, we talked a lot about that, moves into second place ahead of Newgarden. Award and Ericsson sort of swap places there. You know, Award up to fifth and Ericsson down to sixth. 3 of the season Ganassi guys in the top 10 for the season championship. Herta out of the top 10 again with Rossi in. That's kind of been happening here the last few races as well. So Herta's going to need to do something, Tim, if he's going to earn that super license, and if Andretti still intends to take him with them or take him with them to Formula One if they're granted that, you know, that expansion team. So moving on to Gateway, always fun, always exciting, always interesting. I looked at possibly going to that race, but we're going to be out for the weekend with Bill and Jill from Shelby. So
nice.
Looking forward to that. And then
baby.
we'll be watching that on tape. Yeah, we'll be watching that live at the big Bill and Jill from Shelby camper and be eating our s'mores.
Big. Yeah, real big.
Happen. So but that's it. So since we missed your pick last week, which was probably Rahal on pole and Dixon to win, right?
Yeah, I think
We missed
my
that.
dark horse might have been. I don't know who it was. Who knows who it was? But
It
yeah,
was Lundgaard, right? Who finished second or who finished
yeah,
fourth. So yeah,
yeah. I
you
think
had
that's
it
who it
all
was.
swept
That's
up.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had it all right last week. I
Yeah.
just wasn't able to, tell the fans
So
or tell the
we didn't get,
listeners.
didn't get a chance to articulate that. So we'll give you a chance to give us your picks first.
Well, I Dan, you probably knew this, right? Joseph's won the last three out of Gateway. So he's does very well there. Plus, he won in 17, which was a little while ago. So he is obviously one of the favorites, but he is not going to be my pick at all because I just don't think it's going to come together after last week. Poll, I've got I got your guy, Will Power on poll. I think he's gonna do that. I think Penske's gonna be strong for sure. For the win, I'm going with Scotty Mack. And my dark horse is going to be Sato.
Oh, I like that. So you don't want me to put my picks in the notes anymore. This has been several.
And by the way, Sato's
races.
number was 2019 winner.
Yeah. I don't put them in anymore.
Yeah, so, I don't want to see your picks.
And I have Spencer's picks too. So for those of you watching on the YouTube, right? Who's Dan's picks? Power.
Dan's pick is
pole.
Power for pole, McLaughlin winning, and Rossi is your
the dark horse.
Dark horse. Spencer's got Power. Hold on, let me read.
Power, Newgarden.
Okay, Newgarden,
and your boy Ferrucci.
Oh my goodness,
as the dark horse.
Wow.
So look at that. We're starting to think alike still on these picks. So
without even seeing your picks.
77 episodes into this thing.
That means we're both wrong.
I think the power on pole, I think is a really strong pick. I really do. I mean, that's definitely a strong pick. I like the Scotty Mack pick for the win too. I really like that because I know he wants to win on an oval. Everybody wants to win, but I know he definitely wants to win on an oval. It's not his thing.
He wants to beat the bus bro. So
yeah, he does.
For sure.
Especially after his bus bro made him eat all that hot chicken. Did you see that episode yet?
Mm-mm.
It's wonderful.
Is it good? Is it the last episode or is it a while back?
It's the most current. No, it's the
most current. Episode. I might have to check it out. All right.
I want you to check it out because what they do with the eggs in the trivia contest, I think you and I can pull that together for.
Oh, nice. We'll have to check it out. All right, I'll check it out. I'll report back.
So that's that. That's all I got, Timmy.
Same here. It's been an awesome show. A lot of fun. Show. Great race. Another great race coming, even though the championship.
Couple weeks, we got a little time. Yeah.
Yeah, we got a couple weeks, but that's all right. We need a break. Everybody needs a break. So yeah, it should be good. We'll see. Penske's been dominant.
Yeah. Hey, shout out to Evan Dawson for double checking for us that the Rahal Letterman Lanigan race shop is still in Zionsville, Indiana. Thanks for that, Evan.
Not Napa.
Not Napa. So, hey, be sure to continue to engage with us on social media, and we love to see your thoughts and everything written there on our YouTube and on Twitter and some of the direct messages that we get from people. So we appreciate all that. Got a couple of weeks before Gateway, which will be a wonderful race, and then a nice tidy finish to the season where Pelot will be crowned champion, and then he'll be racing wherever he's racing next year, which I think it's Ganassi, and I've been saying that all season. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. Tell your friends. Sign up to be a Patreon sponsor so we can get Tim a single serve
fresh cup of coffee every time.
Yep. That's it. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Take care.